We are under 72 hours to kick off Clemson and LSU for the 2019 College Football National Championship. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking it down. We got perspective from the LSU and Clemson side. Let's turn it over to the Tigers here with Billy Gomilla and the Valley Shook. You can catch him right there on SB Nation. Billy, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. Still does it. It's weird for it to be Friday, but the game is still 3 days away, and still, it's a weird lag time, but at the same time, a lot of energy still going around here in the state.
Yeah, for much of the college football playoff, there would be the semifinal games, and then there would roughly be 9-10 days because they play on a Monday night, but having to play on a Saturday and waiting that extra loop of a week playing on a Monday night, we're looking at 16 days to wait around for this one. But you've been waiting a long time for another shot at a national championship. It's been 8 years. And, man, I got to ask you, Billy, since we have yet to talk during this season, I think our last conversation goes back to the offseason. This whole Joe Brady offense, Joe Burrow, it had to have worked about 10 times to your expectations.
Yeah, I was on the optimistic side just on the strength of LSU returning a lot of experience and having experienced quarterback, experienced receivers, just lots of talent returning. And I liked what I saw in the spring in terms of, okay, this is definitely going to be different. We'll see how it works in practice. And then once we saw once the season started, the funny thing was that Georgia Southern game where they come out and I think Burrow was something like 24 of 28 or something ridiculous in that game. He was like 80% of his completed like 80% of his passes. And after that game, I wrote like, well, this is really great. And the thing is, he's not going to complete 80% of his passes every week, but he probably won't fall off that much, and didn't really fall off at all. He kind of did that the rest of the year. And as I'm working on my game preview, all I keep coming back to is from a Clemson perspective and really from every perspective, I don't think you can stop this offense. I don't really see even how you would do it.
So every time I talk this game and come to that question, I go back to the Auburn game. So on one side, only 23 points scored, but it was a game in which LSU amassed over 500 yards of total offense. They still moved the ball, just got bogged down in the red zone. Auburn turned them over once in the red zone. So they did the type of things, and they made them drive the length of the field, and they've got that kind of defense that they have one of the better defensive lines in the country, first and foremost. To at least not get burned by the chunk plays, they at least made them drive it 10 and 12 plays to get there.
And Auburn had some success with that, but I don't know how replicable that is because you're putting your defense in that same situation of, okay, well, if we make this come down to just a handful of plays, maybe we can get some stops. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. LSU converts a fourth down or two, and Joe Burrow doesn't throw an interception, which he's only thrown a handful of them this year. That game's not nearly as close. So I imagine that's what Clemson will try and do because I don't know what else would work. But I don't think that's something you can go in thinking this is what's gonna be what works for us. It still leaves your defense still didn't have a good day if you gave up 500 yards of offense and more than 5 yards of play. And maybe like I said, you're lowering your own margin for error, even though you're lowering LSU's, you're also lowering it for yourself. LSU ran 88 plays in that game. If they run 88 plays on Monday, I'd be very surprised if they didn't win.
Yeah, and the other aspect of that game that puts it in better context, just to put the score in perspective, yeah, it was a 23-20 game, but Auburn scored extremely late in that game.
Yes, that also made it closer than it looked.
Yeah, to make a 23-13 game, a 23-20 game in which they were, sure, they had a semblance of a chance with an onside kick, but LSU actually had a 2-score win until very late in the game. Got Billy Gomilla on the line from SB Nation's and the Valley Shook to break down the LSU side of this national championship matchup with Clemson. So, Billy, the defense has been just so much better in recent weeks, starting with, the Texas A&M game, I think, is the one that caught everybody's attention because even though the Aggies are down, they're loaded with 4- and 5-star talent on offense, and they could only muster a touchdown in that game. And then once they go up against Georgia, and again, Georgia struggling on offense to a certain extent, but still loaded with talent, putting up really the 10 points that they put up were meaningless. The touchdown didn't mean anything. So LSU, is it scheme? I hear about them going from 3 to 4 defensive linemen late in the season, them getting healthier, them getting maybe a little pissed off to a certain extent about the offense getting too much attention, and them raising their bar up to typical LSU defensive standards.
I think it's mostly a combination of health, and I do think that some of it was mental, and some of it I think was kind of misunderstood. A lot of these games where teams put up big offensive numbers, they put those points up well after the game was in hand. Ole Miss, for all the damage that they did, and as close as they were able to get that game was 28-0 before they started moving the ball, really. So I think some of that was LSU taking its foot off the gas on defense. Some of it was also, I thought this going into the matchups with A&M and with Georgia, is just the style of offense those two schools run. I think it's a bad matchup against LSU. The teams that have had success against LSU are the teams that can kind of attack their safeties and slot corners and coverage, not so much run the ball and try to hit passes down the field on the sidelines. Oklahoma was something of a different animal because I thought they might be able to do that with CeeDee Lamb, who works mostly out of the slot, and then Jalen Hurts, who's a great runner. But at the end of the day, LSU was able to just kind of sit on everything short and trust that he couldn't really beat them over the top. So that's going to be a little bit different. Clemson's going to be a different animal because they've got great receivers outside. The receiver-corner matchup in this one's just going to be fantastic between two big physical, big play receivers in Higgins and Justin Ross. And then on LSU side, you've got 2 6-foot-plus big physical cornerbacks who have been great against receivers this year. They gave up some plays to Alabama, but Alabama's receivers are a little bit different of a matchup. They're a little on the smaller side. They're a little on the shiftier side, and they were able to get separation that way. That's not really what Clemson does. So I'm really curious to see how it works out. The player that scares me is probably Travis Etienne because he's a guy that it only takes one missed tackle. And that's when LSU struggled in run defense, it's usually been because of missed tackles.
And I got to think that Dave Aranda took note that Ohio State shut him down as a traditional runner. Then in the second half, they started to leak him out of the backfield and find him some space in the secondary and pop some passes to him for huge gains and the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah. It's good. I really don't think either defense is – I think this game probably comes down to the offense that blinks. I think both these defenses are going to have a tough time getting a lot of stops. That's more about the two offenses here.
Ed Orgeron has fooled a lot of people in regards to his ability to handle this kind of program and raise it to this level. And obviously the emergence of Joe Brady and bringing him in to just take over the offense and work with Ensminger and it has a lot to do with it. But also it's been pretty impressive to see Ed Orgeron kind of exemplify a lot of swagger in a very respectful and politeful way. But what are your thoughts about how he's developed, considering his failings at Ole Miss and him taking ownership of his missteps there, maybe not getting the shot that he should have at USC despite going 6-2 and navigating a difficult situation and a difficult schedule there, then getting this shot and many people doubting him, but him being able to pull through?
Well, from the second he was hired, I felt pretty confident that the Ole Miss times were behind him. He had kind of shown that at USC, I thought, and then, in his interim stint there, and then his interim stint here. He did exactly what he said he was going to do in terms of, I'm going to hire good coaches, I'm going to recruit, we're going to play hard. And the results were pretty instantaneous in that regard. That first year, I think, was a transition that I think was kind of destined based on just the composition of the roster and some of the failings of recruiting at the end of the Miles era that maybe we didn't necessarily see in real time, but we saw a lot of that attrition, especially along the line of scrimmage, kind of bear fruit. And he kind of pushed the reset button a little bit in 2018, and it wasn't always pretty, but that team got better over the course of the year and finished on a really strong note. And then the Brady hire was one that, I don't think anybody can really say they knew a lot about the guy when he was hired, but he fit the profile of what they wanted in terms of what they said they wanted. Young guy, kind of versed in the spread offense, worked with Joe Moorhead at Penn State. And, everybody talks about his time with the Saints, but really what you see from him is much more, in my opinion, what the Penn State offense looked like when Moorhead was there with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley and those guys, when they made it to the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago. And it's kind of, I think, been the perfect storm with a senior quarterback and some really talented receivers, a very experienced group. And I'm excited to see how it continues going forward. Can they hold on to Brady as more teams come calling for him? Can they transition to new quarterbacks? So on and so forth. It's an exciting time, and just with the way this team is played, I just really hope they get that opportunity to kind of go out on that high note and really clinch the legendary status that they've shown this year. That the opportunity's there for them to claim.
Talking LSU football, we got Billy Gomilla on the line from SB Nation's In the Valley Shook. You can join him and the rest of the staff covering LSU athletics. We glazed over the offense, or I did, in just regards to the complete package with the Joe Brady hire and emergence. But Joe Burrow's become a bit of a modern-day folk hero now there at LSU with what he's accomplished this year. It's just been a storybook arrival and story of him coming down there and doing what he's accomplished specifically this season.
Yeah, I mean, in 2018, I said, we saw the intangibles. We saw that he was a tough kid. We saw that he was a leader. We saw that the team really responded to him. We didn't see everything that he could do as a passer. He struggled a little bit with accuracy at times. And, you could see that he made really good decisions, but you just didn't see him go out there and just sling it around the way he's done this year. And it's been the perfect storm of him. When guys are covered, he throws them open. When guys are open, he finds them. He makes the right decision almost every time. And that's what's made this offense just so hard to stop. There's no one thing that you say, well, if we just do this, here's what they struggle with. They've beaten teams that have tried to roll everybody up and say, let's see if you can throw it over the top. And they've beaten teams that have tried to play the safeties off and said, okay, let's see if you can dig and dunk your way down the field and be patient. They've been able to do it all. And, like I said, it's blown expectations out the water to the point where I've actually started to think about next year and think, okay, well, Miles Brennan can be really, really good and not be half of what Joe Burrow has done this year. And that's a scary thought. I knew I would see good quarterback play. I expected to see good quarterback play this year. I did not expect to see transcendent quarterback play, and I don't know that I ever thought I would see another Heisman Trophy winner at LSU.
And some people have said that Peach Bowl was kind of a precursor, or was it the Fiesta Bowl, whichever they played?
Fiesta Bowl, probably.
Fiesta Bowl against UCF was a precursor, throwing for the 400 yards in the big win over UCF. I don't know if it's because LSU wasn't as on the radar. LSU's always on the radar, but in regards to national championship type implications late in the season last year in 2018, or it was the style of offense or what it was. But Joe Burrow has shown himself to be an even better athlete than many of us. The type of plays that he's making, both as a runner and just breaking contain out of the pocket and beating fast defenders to the first down marker, number one. And number two, it's this dodging guys in the backfield and throwing these ridiculous passes downfield that find their target.
It's been everything. The other week, as on Twitter, some of us were debating, who's had the better year, him or Cam Newton in 2010. And it's hard to pick against Newton because that Auburn team just did not have nearly the talent level of this LSU team. But just the fact that you can mention the two things in the same breath, and it's not crazy to talk about, is something. I mean, he's going to have a chance to, maybe by Tuesday morning have 60 touchdowns, and that's just unreal. Like I said, it feels crazy to even talk about it.
All right, everyone. For more LSU Clemson coverage, check out Billy's work there at And the Belly Shook on SB Nation as they break down the Tigers and the Tigers. Billy, we always appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game.
Thanks a lot, man. I hope I get to.